Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to the earliest session on time. Yay! To start everything off, I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of this land, and pay my respects to their elders, both past, present, and future. My name is Ngaio. You say it, Ngaio. I'm an illustrator and a multidisciplinary designer and a curator. I teach at the University of Technology, Sydney, and I'm the founder and director of Make Nice, which is an unconference for creative women. Tickets on sale now. First up, I'd like to say congratulations, because you have come to not an all-male panel. Good job. We won't be featured on this Tumblr, which is very entertaining to look at. It's just a giant list of all-male panels all over the world with the David Hasselhoff thumb of approval. And my favourite one is this one. They're celebrating remarkable women with a wall of honour with 3 white dudes. Women start out as the majority in creative fields through tertiary education and even some junior positions. A few years on, these numbers change significantly, with vast underrepresentation of women in senior creative roles, educational curriculum, media representation, and almost all creative conferences, not Adobe Make It, though. The impact of gender, mood lighting. The impact of gender in the creative industries is difficult to pin down decisively due to a combination of lack of awareness, interest, and statistics on the matter. The barriers are deeply rooted, persistent, multifaceted, and ever evolving. Before we jump into it, there's a few basic truths that I'd like to assume we're all on the same page on before we start our discussion. I'm going to assume that everyone here believes in the equality of the sexes, aka feminism. We're all here to be respectful and genuinely want to learn and ask questions. And I also want to assume that even if we haven't personally experienced it, or think you haven't experienced it, that sexism still affects lots of people on a daily basis. I'll also take this moment to acknowledge that myself, everyone on our panel, and probably everyone in this room carries privilege of some kind, and to think of others and not only themselves in the realm of this discussion. This is not about conceding that we've all had an easy life. I'm sure none of us have, but it's about acknowledging that there are certain struggles that we will never understand. So, for instance, I will never understand the issues perfectly of being a person of colour, LGBTIQ, or from a low socioeconomic background, and I think that's important to keep in mind in this discussion. We'll start the panel with some discussion on some of the specific problems that we face in this issue, because it's gigantic, so I'm going to try and kind of cut it into bite-sized pieces. And hopefully by the end of it, there'll be some tips so that no matter whether you're an intern or a CEO, there'll be something you can put into action when you leave the room. Okay, let's introduce the panellists. First up, Niccola Phillips. Niccola has over 14 years experience working across digital, direct, print, design and TV, working at agencies including M&C Saatchi and DDB. Niccola's received industry awards and commendations from the Webbies, ACNE, ADMA and the Echoes. Niccola is a passionate champion of diversity in advertising and has founded a mentoring program for creative females called Power of 10, and is a National Award School Head for 2007. She was a panellist at Vivid Sydney 2016 and is a regular contributor to Ad News. Niccola spends her spare hours writing, taking photographs and creating sculptural works. She's been exhibited in various Sydney and Melbourne galleries and has been the recipient of both sculptural and photography prizes. Next, we have Jane Connory. Jane is a PhD candidate at the Monash University Art, Design and Architecture, working towards a gender-inclusive history of Australian graphic design. She was awarded a Master's in Communication Design with distinction from RMIT in 2016, and has been a practicing designer and illustrator in the advertising, branding and publishing sectors, both in London and Melbourne from 1997. Alongside her research exploring the visibility of women in design, she's currently a senior lecturer at Torrens University, a radio presenter on Joy 94.9, and an active participant in the Creative Women's Circle, Illustrators Australia and the Australian Graphic Design Association. Jane's research through design is quantifying the visibility of women in the history of Australian graphic design from 1960 through data visualisation, information graphics and generative art. Last but not least, we wouldn't want to have an all-women panel. We have Jim Antonopoulos. Jim is an advocate for B corporations who has a long-standing passion for understanding how people interact with brands, culture and technology. He's interested in meaningful impact and working with for-purpose organisations that stand for something positive and seek to create positive social impact in the world. At Tank, Jim works with leadership teams to help build meaningful organisations that start with purpose and empathy for the people that they serve. He's inspired by human-centred design and an advocate for flat, more collaborative organisational structures. Jim has the privilege of working with some of Australia's pioneering organisations and leadership teams, and he's passionate about mentoring young people, as well as fatherhood and the representation of men in mainstream media. Okay, does everyone want to come up and we'll sit down? Oh, whoops. Oh, sorry. This is everyone's thingies. I'm going to have to ask you what Von Wolf is at one stage, Niccola.
I appreciate it.
Okay, sorry, not good with the clicker. All right. Just a quick question first. What's the problem? No, just kidding. So this problem manifests itself in lots of different ways, and I'm trying to kind of cut it into 3 segments for this talk. One is education and media representation and conferences and awards. The other's leadership position, and the next one would be unconscious bias and just those day-to-day niggling issues. Okay, so first can we all explain why you're engaged with women in leadership in the creative industries, where your interests or experience lies?
Ooh, do I get to start?
Yes.
I think I'm engaged. It's funny, I would never have called myself a feminist when I was growing up. I actually genuinely believed that there wasn't a problem, and I went all guns blazing into advertising at age 21, and I was the only girl in the creative department, and I went, that's brilliant, I love it, I get all the attention and everything else. And then I think I became a feminist by default, as I realised that over time I saw my male colleagues who, honestly, hand on heart, I'm going to believe in myself here, were no more talented than me, get more and more opportunities and creep ahead. And so I think I've really purposefully set myself on a path as a result and gone, what can we actively do to change this? Because I want this to be 100% the last generation of women who ever has to feel that frustration.
Yep. Okay. Jane?
Hi.
Hi.
I had a very similar experience. I did a graphic design degree in the 90s and started out in advertising thinking, oh, there's no issue here. And it was beaten down very quickly, and I stepped out of the industry very quickly and tried a bit of everything. I did graphic design, worked in publishing, illustration, worked for myself, and I've ended up in education, and it's a great place because I see the stats are 71% of graduates out of pretty much worldwide out of graphic design, visual communication are women. And so I am seeing this next generation come with guns blazing, and I want to make sure that they see role models, they have mentors, and so my research is sort of exploring that visibility of women in design and trying to make them more visible for this next generation, and be part of talking about that. I think it's really important.
And exciting. Jim?
It is important and exciting. I've got almost the same type of history as Jane. I did a degree in the 90s as well, but I've also experienced bias of different sorts. I was considered a person of colour when I was a kid. No longer now. And there are all sorts of these issues are quite complex, and that's why it interests me, because things do change. Why I'm engaged in this topic, I have 3 children, 2 of them are female, 1 of them is male. All 3 of them are going to be extraordinary leaders of their own right. And I see my role as a father as critical in helping them achieve that. That's probably my prime objective and the prime reason I'm interested in topics such as this.
Yep, great. Jane, I might start with you. Can you tell us, a bit of a big question, but can you tell us the problems that you see from that education and media representation point of view?
Sure. Yeah, so the education thing is, you know, the whole idea of, and I can't find who's first said this in my research, you've got to see it to be it, you know.
Yes.
Anyone knows where that comes from, please tell me. And that whole idea of self-efficacy is huge. And we were talking before about how women get to the industry and what's going to stop them, what is that glass ceiling, and how being a mum can be one of those issues. And so seeing women who do be a mum and continue on in their career is important too. Yeah. Part of my research was finding women and making them more visible. Again, plugging our own things. I've published a website called affirmation.com, AFFEM. I surveyed industry beginning of last year, asking them to list women who'd made significant contributions to Australian graphic design since 1960. 142 women were named, but on average people could only name one woman. And so I took the top 25 women listed, so the most visible women in Australian graphic design. I've put them on this website with their work, with beautiful portraits of them, with videoed interviews to give them a voice as well. We need to see and we need to hear from women, again for the sake of students and if not everyone else, to be a bit inspired. But this website's also an insight into how these women are connected. Again, we were talking before about how this issue can be looked at in two ways. We can look at ourselves and what we can do, the whole lean-in philosophy. But, you know, society, the industry has a big impact too. So we're coming from both ways. So this website looks at these women and how they are connected within industry through education and through industry bodies. And there's a lovely little sort of diagram. You can explore these connections and literally figure out how you can connect to these connections.
Yeah.
You know, it is a small industry in Australia.
Yeah.
And it's not hard to do, but often, well, where do we find those doors? How do we meet these people? That can often be a problem too. So, yeah, I'm interested in this visibility and this voice issue.
And do you think that starts, I see in my students that I teach at UTS, the other lecturers don't showcase even a lot of graphic designers or art history women, which I actively change. But there's, you know, 80 to 90% of my students are women, and then in the lectures and their teachers and the cool graphic designers of the time are majority men, so it's not being able to see it to be it.
So there's two levels there. There's the staff, and so lecturers. Academia has another huge problem. The statistics are there that it's mainly men. Design faculties, we're starting to see a lot of women sort of going into academia as well. So yeah, seeing the lecturers helps and understanding recruitment processes in academia, but the class content is terrific. I've program managed for 5 years, a degree at Torrance, really blue. And yeah, this whole idea of this conscious and unconscious biases that we'll talk about later too, the people we hire to write content, you see those biases when you're thinking about it. And it is, it's all your Stefan Zagmeisters, and they'll skip past Jessica Walsh, or, you know, even when they're looking at the rock stars.
Or it's like Jessica Walsh, his assistant, you know. Or what did she do because she's so young?
So again, that my website was trying to open up some class content that people could share and put in, because often lecturers just get stuck because they were taught the same, you know, Milton Glaser, whatever.
It's more work to find those women,
And everyone needs to make the effort to look and find, and it's a great resource to do.
And Niccola, do you want to expand on that from your viewpoint, going through education or seeing?
I mean, look, definitely. I think I obviously I studied visual communications at UTS actually, but in the last 14 years, obviously, I've been working in advertising. And in the last 2 years, I've been the head of a school called Award School, which is I guess it's like the breeding ground for our next generation of art directors and copywriters here in Australia. I think what's interesting was coming into that position, one of the first sort of issues that I was confronted with was that the claim that was being made by the industry was that less women wanted to be in creative departments, that there was only about 30% female to 70% male at the award school stage.
Yeah.
But what was amazing was it turned out that in the very first year that I was a school head, we decided, well, let's just do one very simple thing. We're just going to take the names off the applications and we're just going to replace them with a random number. Now, the moment we did that, we went from 30% female to 50% female. So there's your unconscious bias right there.
Yeah.
And the next thing we did is, and I cannot say that we did this 100% because we do have a massive gender imbalance in the industry currently, but we tried to do 50% lecturers and 50% tutors.
Yeah.
And then what was interesting was at the end of the course, when we got to final top 10, for the first time ever, we tipped the scales and suddenly we had more women in the top 10 than men. So actually a series of really simple, almost mechanical decisions on our part did make a difference. Was the calibre of the entries any lower? Of course not.
Yeah.
You know, was the calibre of the lectures lower? Of course not. And I think the other thing is we gave a whole generation of women brushing against the glass ceiling an opportunity for also a bit of exposure. So I think we didn't just help people at the bottom, we helped people at every stage.
Yeah. And Jim, do you have any idea, any concepts on the education system?
As far as education goes, I wrote a course on strategy the last couple of years, an online course. And I was very conscious of strategy is a concept built out of war, therefore men made it up, right? Thousands of years ago. Well, as far as we know.
Yeah.
So it's easy to talk about, to use a lot of male, masculine terminology, etc., etc.
Yeah.
I was very conscious in writing that document and that course. And so during that course, I refer to the general on the battlefield, i.e. the strategic leader.
Yeah.
In my course, it's a female.
Yeah.
And that's deliberately done.
Yeah.
And a lot of people write back to me about that and congratulate me for doing that.
Yeah.
And it's really subtle.
Small changes.
Because I'll just refer to her throughout, 5 or 6 hours of course content and 100,000 words. I refer to her, the intricacies, the decisions she needs to make, etc.
Yeah.
Irrespective of holding up famous people, because I've never really bought into that during my design education because they were just famous people.
Yeah.
Irrespective of whether they're male or female, they were unreachable, untouchable.
Yeah.
For me, what's more impactful in the education system is the subtleties that we see day to day, the characterizations that we create, the masculine, female, or non-gender characterizations that we create, and personifications that we create in our course content. That's more important because they're the unconscious things that we walk away with.
Yeah.
The famous people are just famous people.
Yeah.
They are just untouchable, and it creates a sense of elitism that creates a whole host of other problems.
Other issues, yeah. And I think that also translates through to media representation. I remember going to a talk by Gina Davis, and one of the kind of things that she mentioned that I remember was extras in films, in animated films, where you can make up what gender they are 70% men. So even the extras in an animated film are not even, which makes no sense at all. They're just walking in the background in a field. So even these tiny things still need change. So moving that into design awards and things like that, what do you think their responsibilities should be with representation?
Ooh. Do I get to start again?
Yeah, sorry, Niccola, you're closest to me.
No, that's all right. Look, I think design awards are obviously, it's a bit like what I was saying with award school. It's actually quite a simple way to create a really big change. And it's interesting actually because there's been a lot of commentary recently about juries and design juries and industry juries and whether they should be 50-50 and whether, again, are you diluting the quality of the jury, the calibre of the jury, if you do promote women who perhaps have less of a sort of a public profile than their male compatriots. So it's interesting, actually, a few months ago now, I was a design juror at the Cannes Lions, and that was a 50-50 male-female jury, and I think for me it was the first time I'd been in a 50-50 jury. And let me tell you, the women were incredible powerhouses from all around the world. Like the calibre of the discussion, and I guess the assertiveness of the opinions, and what ended up coming out and what ended up coming to the fore in terms of work, I can only say was benefited by that.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing to kind of note is that in doing that, again, that kind of raises that overall profile, and I'll be interested to see the statistics moving forward, but it would seem that the actual work that is judged gets judged in a slightly different way, and so I wouldn't be surprised then if more female creators or more diverse creators begin to get acknowledged by doing that. So I'm a big believer in it personally.
Jane, what does your research tell you about
Yeah,
this kind of thing?
so I did a case study on AGDA, which I know Jing's part of, the Australian Graphic Design Association. Used to be. So they've run awards since 1994. And again, I was exploring the visibility of women's on that platform, and I found that jurors and winners, only 25% on average across the board from the start to the finish. It hasn't changed. It's hugely disappointing knowing that pipeline of women has been feeding that industry at such a high percentage, around 60-70% during that time too. And what was interesting is there was 2 anomalies in that data. In 1996, there were more female jurors than males. And that year, the winners in the creative director category were equal male-female.
Interesting.
Mind you, there's a blind judging process, so it's a weird thing to measure, knowing that they didn't know who was male or female, but that's what happened. The only other year where there was more winners, I can't remember, it was 98, the greatest percentage of female winners was in the finished artist category. So often we find, I think through that research, it shows that women are often sort of delegated to those support roles in industry too. Like it just is a reflection of that visibility of women in industry and the roles that we take. But I sort of put together a list of like a framework guidelines of things that can be worked on, have been proven to work. And it is equitable judging panels. And so the AGDA jury for this year has just been announced. Jim's on it and it's equal. And I'm really excited about that.
Great.
Really excited about that. And AGDA don't promote their blind judging procedure, which I think, on their call to award entries, if they did that, it would actually encourage more women to come in, because it's intimidating knowing, I don't know how this is going to be judged. But
it seems strange that they don't, really.
Because it's a huge benefit, and you do place trust in it, knowing that. And so that's another recommendation that has been proven through different sort of awards all around the world to sort of do something like that. And addressing unconscious biases. Nick Aldridge is the CEO of AGDA currently, and we've been talking about this issue, and he sort of says, I ask all these women to judge, and 9 times out of 10 they'll say no. And he's got the statistics to show me too. So this whole idea of women, we've got to step up. Yes, but I interviewed a lot of women who had been jurors, and a lot of them said yes when they knew someone, or they sort of had this mentor relationship of someone else who'd done it before. So this whole idea of supporting women into those positions is really important too. I don't know if anyone's seen that meme going around on the internet. It's funny how my research goes to these unacademic places. But there's a tall picket fence. There's 3 people, really short, medium-sized and tall person. And there's a game of cricket going on, and only the tall person can see. And then they find 3 boxes, and they put 2 under the short person and 1 under the medium-sized person. Then they can all see. Then it all becomes an equitable view, you know. To be equal, no one should have a box, you know. But to be equitable, you've got to give that short person 2 boxes. And I feel like this is that scenario that ask a woman to don't just leave it there. It's kind of
do that with your career. Like, just say yes to stuff.
Yeah. And
Jump.
I think
Yeah, jump.
Just have a go.
Yeah.
you can also like push that a little bit. And if you see an event or a talk or an association or a board where you think, wait a second, I know more about this than these fools, like send them an email and say, hey, next time you want someone to talk on that.
That's what they're all thinking right now.
Yeah. I get a lot of those emails that make nice, and nothing makes me happier. And the thing is, even if you don't fit the criteria for the talk or the whatever I'm organising, I'll keep you in mind when someone asks me about needing people for talks on X topic. So you can't, I think a lot of the time I was waiting for someone to go, oh no, she's the girl to talk to about X. Like, no, you have to say, hi, I'm the girl to talk about X. And eventually, people are slow, but eventually they'll get that and put your name on lists. There's Peggy's list, there's Make Nice, there's Yes Equal, there's Bonnie's, a reparative list for speakers. All of them are just on the internet, and you can put your own name down. Do that if you want to be in those.
Join a boys' club.
Or a girls' club, Make Nice.
Seriously, I say that a little bit, I don't want to sound facetious. When I joined that AGDA committee, I was on AGDA for 8 years, I think I mentioned that earlier, and that was over 10 years ago. It was an all-boys club. Within 6 months, there was one woman who just jumped in,
Yep.
Michaela,
Yeah.
from Round. And she could have gone and joined an all-girls club,
Yeah.
but she jumped in and shattered that, and she broke
Yeah.
that up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Over that 8-year period, not just because of Michaela, but also because of some good men as well, we changed that and
Yeah.
became a very equitable model in
Yeah.
the committee structure.
Yeah.
So if you're a young woman looking to grasp leadership or jump into any of those scenarios, just jump in. And the best way to do it, and to throw a cat amongst the pigeons, is be the only girl in an all-boys club.
Yeah.
Because you hold the seat of power. And
That-
Michaela really showed us that
Yeah.
in that committee. And she's held up
Yeah.
as an icon.
And that being said, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't join a girls' club, because I often get asked, not actually that often, but why aren't men allowed to come to Make Nice? Why aren't men allowed to be in the Slack group? It's not my job to do everything. There's a million different ways that this can be fixed, and mine is creating a female community. Because when I moved to Sydney, I found that incredibly difficult due to the fact that through education systems, friendship groups, movies, TV, we're all taught to compete with each other, whereas men are taught to be friends with each other. And it took me a really long time to realise that people were doing that, and it makes no sense. Dudes are helping each other, women aren't helping each other.
Are
we
they?
lose out both ways.
Are they?
Yes, you see it all the time, like the getting joined into the committee. Like women, generally, obviously this is all a generalisation, but I have a ridiculous list of anecdotal evidence of women actively not helping each other because they think there's one spot and I need to get that spot. I can't help someone else get that
the
spot.
one spot issue, I mean, it's tokenism, isn't
Yeah.
it? And there's so much research about how tokenism
Reversing
is
the
different
tokenism.
experience again for a woman
It is.
than it is for a man.
Oh, look, I think the people who should be celebrated, there are people, all of you should be celebrated in this room, but there are, I think I've counted 5 men in this room
Yeah.
who should be applauded
Yeah.
because they're sitting sitting listening to a topic about women in leadership, and that means they give a shit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And that things
Thank you
like
for giving
that.
a shit.
yeah.
That sitting in a room like this and listening to one dickhead and 3 women, you should be celebrated because you guys, all of you, and the men in the room, are the people who are also going to make some impactful change. I hope all of you make some impactful change. But there actually should be more men in this room.
Yeah. This next question might not be helpful except for the 5 men in the room, but if you are faced with talking on a panel where it is an all-male panel or, in this case, an all-white panel, which is my failure, what should people do if they are offered
I've walked
those
away.
positions?
I always ask the question.
Yeah.
I ask the question of the AGDA jury. I'm not on the AGDA council anymore, so I'm surprised that I was even asked to judge the awards. But I asked the question and I've walked away.
Yeah.
I get to speak at a lot of government kind of events as well. And I always ask about the diversity,
Yeah.
and then I just use that as a catch-all term
Yeah.
of the speaking group and the
Yeah.
panels, and I've rejected a few.
Yeah.
You just have to.
And have you had to do this,
Yeah.
Nicole?
Look, this goes back to me saying yes to stuff. I think go and fly the flag,
Yeah.
but actually make a feature of it and actually steer the conversation and make sure that that voice is heard.
Yeah.
I think I so often feel I don't think anyone ever intentionally sets out to do this. You know, this is unconscious bias that we're talking about here. Either it hasn't occurred to people or for whatever reason it hasn't worked out. I have never been in a situation where people haven't been respectful and
Yeah.
responsive, but you just need to put it out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think, you know, I found what I'm doing, you're creating your women's sort of community. I feel like I'm filling the statistical side of this
void.
in our industry that doesn't exist. The invisibility of the numbers, not knowing how diverse
Yeah.
different sectors of the industry are, advertising, publishing, graphic design studios, strategic studios, is really important because it's ignored and it's not measured. And I feel like that's
You're kind of giving them some
Giving that.
fuel. Yeah. And as a consumer, I would also add, don't go. If there's an all-male panel, don't buy the ticket. Don't go, because then they will stop doing that. Or write them an email, which I have done. Or often I get emails about all-male panels, which puts me in a weird position. But if they're emailing Make Nice to tell me about it, email the organiser as well, because they need to know if it is unconscious as well.
So that feminism is coming in waves. We're in the fourth wave of feminism, and the crux of what, if you want to create equality in genders now, is calling out on the internet, right?
Yeah.
There's an app called the Gender Avenger, and you can open it up in 3 clicks, plug in the hashtag of a conference, how many men, how many women, and press whatever, and it gives you a pie graph of that conference. And then you tweet it or Facebook it or whatever with the hashtag, and
Brilliant.
it's doing exactly that. It's doing the calling it out. It's not,
Make Nice wouldn't be a very good pie chart.
and it's done with a great sense of humour as well. But yeah, there are lots of things that you can do to help that discourse on the internet. It's the best place to do it.
Okay, let's move into leadership positions. Niccola, from a corporate large agency environment, can you walk us through some of the main issues that you see popping up in your working environment?
Every time I get asked this question, I just feel really tired. Look, it's getting better, but honestly, the issue still is that at senior management, we not only still have the balance of the positions filled with men, but it's worse than that. And actually, I'm a total pain in the ass, because every single time the agency asks me my opinion on this, I go, can we not talk about 50-50 male-female in leadership? Can we talk about 50-50 salary split in leadership?
Yes.
And because my other thing is, what I'm increasingly seeing is that women are getting put in lower level leadership positions to bolster the statistics. And I bet you they've been given that instead of a pay rise. And that really pisses me off. So I think that that's one of the things that, again, we all need to push for within our organisations. Organisations are inherently psychopathic. Like, they actually...
Well, the advertising industry.
They don't, yeah, right. Sorry, as I say, I'm going to be the negative one on this panel today. I reckon they're psychopathic. I reckon at the end of the day, the bottom line is the most important thing. They don't actually care about any of this stuff. You know, if it makes them look better, they'll do it. But there's not a sort of a powerful emotional prerogative within an organisation to make a change. So
Some
I think
organisations
that
there are.
some organisations.
Sorry for interrupting.
Yes, no, you're right.
Which
and
really
as I
there
say,
should be
big
when we get to the
corporate.
benefits of actually.
That's right,
having
and
to-
there are many benefits.
Yeah.
But I think until that kind of happens, I think what we have to do is, number one, we have to acknowledge that HR normally aren't our friends in big corporations. HR are actually put there to maintain the status quo and to make sure that everything's all running smoothly and that no one's agitating too much,
Yeah.
in my experience.
I actually got given advice from someone to say, if you are in one of those large organisations, try and make friends with the HR people, if even vaguely possible, so that
That
when
is
they're
true.
looking for people, you can throw them a heap of names that will push that diversity up.
You definitely can do that. yeah.
Sometimes it's more
Yeah.
possible than others, but
But look, I think the other thing to note as a woman is that going back to my 50-50 salary thing, which is my current, big kind of agenda that I'm pushing, is you really need to negotiate for stuff, and you really do need to ask for pay rises, and that is just the worst thing in the world, and I acknowledge that, and I hate it, hate it. But you've actually got to do it. And I think the other thing that you've got to do is, as women, and I'm sure less confident men have exactly the same situation, when someone says no to you, you kind of go, well, I'll never do that again. No, that's the wrong attitude. What you actually need to do is keep on negotiating. What you need to do is go, okay, fine, so you can't give me a pay rise now. What's going to happen in a year's time? If I'm still here in a year's time, what are you going to promise me, and what can you put in writing? Like, keep on hustling.
Pushing.
Because the organisation is never going to do it for you. Yes, sorry,
Well,
maybe yours will. Maybe yours will. Mine won't.
So how is that different, Jim, in your...
Well, it's complex. The organisation won't do it for you. I run a private business. It's my business. I run it because I have personal goals. Some of those goals are financial. If I give someone a raise, it impacts my own personal home, my children, my family. So when someone, irrespective of gender, asks me for a raise, I can join that conversation all the way through to food on my table at home. Right? So yes, it's that impactful. If I give you an extra $10,000 a year, that means one less holiday for my family, whatever.
Yeah.
A private business owner. And are there any in the room? Hands?
A few.
1, 2, 2. Wow, cool. Hello. That's the line that the private business owner does. But for me, I think yes, there are organisations out there that care. I hope that mine is one of them. We have a large majority female staff, not by design, just because. It just happens that way. And there are various reasons we can talk about. But the things that you mentioned, negotiating for a salary, understanding the context of getting a raise, what that means to the bottom line, what that means to the social dynamic within an organisation, are skills in professionalism. Things, and I've seen the lack of those skills in men and women, especially graduates. So I hold the education industry accountable for that. If a student doesn't know how to negotiate a graduate doesn't know how to negotiate their entry-level salary, that's the educational industry's fault. They should. They should know how to have that conversation.
And hands up, how many people were taught that at university?
We weren't taught that at university,
exactly.
no.
So I start teaching it now as knowing your worth to all my students. And the basic, how to calculate an hourly rate, I was never taught that at uni. Most people I know, sort of our crusty old ages now, weren't. And that's the seed for then, okay, I know my worth, I can negotiate to that level,
But
and
also,
find those opportunities.
Negotiation skills, just walking away with a win-win, because you might want $100,000, but you need to understand that 85 might be a win, or 95 might be a win.
And how everyone has their own needs at heart. And I think also when I teach my students this, it's like, well, understand what is important to you, is it working with Jim in this sort of family orientated business, knowing what opportunities there, what clients you work for, what impact you're making as a B Corp in industry. If that's really important, negotiate for that. Look for a place like that to
It's going to be
work
different
for.
to your pay if you're working with Niccola.
So have a self-worth, know your worth, and negotiate to what's important to you. I think another problem in the industry, in creative industries, is it's a sort of a passion industry. We do it because we love it. And we can devalue our worth because we're doing something we love.
How fun you draw for a living.
And it is a job, it's a business, and we have to understand that too and know what value that has to you.
And again, that's how you make change. That's how you help young women. You begin with those very subtle bedrock things like teaching young women, men and women, professionalism, equitable professionalism, emotional intelligence at the education, at the degree level.
Which now is the most requested skills through Make Nice, is negotiating figuring out your pricing, confidence in your career.
Presentation.
They're the three
Yeah.
biggest things that are requested when you're buying a ticket. And Niccola, do you find that you're almost putting yourself between a rock and a hard place? Because if you do learn those negotiation skills, there's data that suggests that you're much more likely than men to be considered intimidating, bossy, aggressive.
Oh yeah.
If you are doing that.
Yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. And by the way, I come across really tough now, but actually I'm not very good in the office. I'm a bit of a pussycat, honestly, most of the time. And that's a bit of a survival strategy as well. You don't want to stick your neck out too far. I think that everyone needs to be nice. At the end of the day, like there's an element of that. Like no matter who you are, don't be an asshole. But I think also you do need to clearly communicate to people what it is that you want and what it is that you're worth. And I mean even just fighting for an idea that you've had that people aren't necessarily backing. I think it's just one of those things where everyone needs to push. It doesn't matter who you are. Some people are better at pushing than other people. They're the people who tend to go further.
Yeah.
No one really has a lot of time to notice the quiet ones. I wish they would. I think management people all need to be taken into a room and told to just look at the quiet person.
Again, it's almost
just
laziness because it's like not right in front of their faces.
Everyone's like, oh, but it's like this. We don't have time to,
Yeah.
Well, maybe you could take the extra 5 minutes just occasionally.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah. And Jane, do you have any ideas through your research how women can push for those senior positions? Or even in your interviews with...
I think really it does boil down to that self-worth, and I think in the creative industries, through the interviews I've done, it is the whole idea of grit, stick-with-itness.
Yeah.
Like every time you get a knockback, don't shrink back. It's to bounce back, have some resilience and keep going. Rosanna Dorizio, creative director at ERD, was one of the women I've interviewed, and she's well into her career, 30 years, I think, as a creative director now. And back in the day, decided to take a few years off to have her first child. It ended up being 5 years where she was part-timing in the industry, sort of freelance work and some sessional teaching. But to get back to full-time, she had to go back to undergrad wage, so junior wage, and start in a junior position to start again. And that's not an uncommon story. And this is my point is to stick with it. If you get a no for that whatever position you're gunning at, your value can give something to it. Just keep going.
Yeah.
Actually, interestingly, in line with this, there's a really high level, like one of Australia's most prominent creative directors quietly said something to me a few months ago, and he'd been getting a little bit of flack because he didn't actually have many senior female creatives. And he said to me it was funny because he'd done some real soul searching on it, because he'd started essentially beating himself up about it, that he had 3 beautiful daughters at home and yet he didn't have senior females. And he started to look at his own behaviour, and he said he realised he'd been interviewing for someone at that creative director level, and that all these great women kept on coming in, and he looked at their portfolios, and then he'd sort of reject them because they weren't as on point as the male portfolios, that they didn't have the coolest new media, and they didn't have the buzzwords, and they just weren't quite as social or content based as perhaps the industry was demanding. And so he rejected them. And then he realised 3 months into his fruitless search that what was actually going on here was that this was a generation of women who either had recently had children or alternatively had been bumping against the glass ceiling in agencies and never getting the briefs that were cool enough to tick those creative director boxes. Yeah. So he actually said what he decided to do from that moment on was to not take all of the social conditioning off the work. Look for the purity of the idea. Just go, I'm going to treat this the same way as if it's someone straight out of uni, where I just look for the potential. I'm going to hire based on that. And then he went on to hire an amazing senior female creative. But for him, it was such a conscious process. And I just went, I cannot applaud him highly enough. Like, that's such a beautiful story, that he admitted that there was a problem and he thought his way through to a solution.
Yeah, that's great. I don't want to heap too much responsibility on women that are in senior positions, but if you are a woman in a senior position or a woman that owns her own business or a woman in the education system that has some kind of ability to help others, what would be your advice? Jane, Niccola.
Do you want to jump in first?
Look, again, the interviews and the profiles are created on affirmation. The most visible women are business owners in Australian graphic design, Niccola. And what you find when you look at their studios is mainly women working for them. I know you have mainly women in your studio, and we've had this conversation that this balance is starting to tip because these women as business owners starting, in the industry. This is shifting things because the women are simply there and have a little bit of a different lens. I just kind of want to make the distinction too, again through my research I've seen this. The visibility and the experience of women in the industry changes from sector to sector. Advertising's at the worst end of the pendulum. It really, really is.
It's true.
It's ridiculously true. If you swing over to publishing, that's an all-women almost environment.
I wonder why I designed books.
And, you know, there's all sorts of things you can pull out of that as well. But, you know, somewhere in the middle there right now, I think, anecdotally, graphic design studios are very 50-50.
Yeah.
So that, experience of these different things is different in the different sectors that you look at. And I've done some research on how people hire as well. I think is an interesting part of this conversation. Of graphic design studios that were interested in taking interns from my college. These were the people I was talking to. I gave them 3 options. What's the most important thing? Personality, portfolio, piece of paper. So who they are, the cultural fit in the studio, what was in their portfolio, or their qualifications, their grades, where they went to school and all that kind of stuff. Overwhelmingly, it was this personality and cultural fit. No one really cared that what grades you've got. And I tell my students this, where you went to uni. They care that you've been to uni and you've, again, had this resilient stick-with-itness to prove this is where you want to be.
Yeah.
Portfolio, it's got to have that match to the skill set that they're hiring for and the type of clients that they work with, but it's this cultural fit, and that's where this, if we don't address the unconscious biases of what that means, there's some real issues in that hiring sort of mentality as well.
Translating kind of into that day-to-day dealing with unconscious bias and my favourite, mansplaining. I've read this amazing article that I would encourage you all to read from the New York Times last week about a lot of women that got to the second spot from CEO in large kind of creative companies. And there's a lot of amazing quotes in there, but one is, I thought that it was a pipeline problem, that's why I didn't get there, but it's not. I've been watching the pipeline for 25 years. There's real bias, and without the ability to shine a light on it and really measure it, which is what Jane's trying to do, I don't think anything's going to change. Ultimately, at the top of the organisation, there are fewer and fewer spots, and if you can eliminate an entire class of people, it makes it a lot easier, which is horrifying. I would really recommend you all go and have a look at that article. Obviously, we've all said we see this happening still on a day-to-day basis. What are some of the kind of mechanisms that someone who's not in a senior position, you're an intern or you're a student or you're a junior, where you don't have that power, or you feel you might be penalised if you speak out, what would you recommend people do in that situation?
Ooh, I think it's really all the things that I've already been talking about. It's making sure that you continue to have a voice, and that even if you feel like you're not heard this week, putting it out there again. And I think occasionally you just need to very politely call it and say it the way it is. And again, it's a very hard thing to do, but say for example in a meeting, if someone is always talking over the top of you, quietly reaching a point where even if you can't do it in the meeting, but saying afterwards, look, I found it really hard to get a word in. Do you mind just kind of, letting up a little bit, you know? And I think that that's really important. I think a lot of women, it's funny because I run this little female mentoring program called Power of 10, where we basically get 10 female creatives in a room together with a more senior female creative, and we basically just chat for an hour and a half. And It just means that because advertising, there are so few women in creative departments, if they're in small agencies, they often may not actually know another woman. So it just means that they form some basic social connections. But one of the things that women keep on saying, which I find really interesting, is they actually physically can't get their volume level high enough to be heard in a boardroom. And I think that this comes back to what we were talking about earlier, this social conditioning that little girls are taught to use their inside voice. And if you use your big voice, you're bossy. And so I think that there is an element of having to project. And I know one woman actually who has a technique where if she really feels like she's not being heard and she's not being heard and she's not being heard, she stands up. And she just stands up until someone pays attention to her.
That's
and
amazing.
like, that's confronting, but that's cool, right?
Yeah.
And then amazingly, people will normally shut up and turn around.
Yeah.
So maybe try that one.
Yeah. Jane?
The physicality, there's a lot of research done on body language.
Yeah.
And it, again, personally, what you can do for yourself is that being conscious of how you hold yourself in a space, in a meeting. I did some management training, and the little breakout workshop we had once was with an acting coach, and he had this simple thing where you just stand up and lean forward before you go to a meeting or whatever, and that whole idea of
Power
Sheryl
stance. Yeah.
of Sheryl Sandberg leaning, he was literally saying, do that with your body.
Yeah.
It just puts you in this mindset of confidence to go for it. But I think this whole idea of the different sectors of the industry too, I know most of my graduates out of visual communication in Melbourne entering the industry are going to enter studios that are 4 people or less.
Yeah.
That every decision being made is the bottom line and the boss's dinner table
And nappies.
And nappies. And so these kind of scenarios are a little bit different. There's no HR departments, there's no... And to me, it all boils down to entering that space, knowing your worth again.
Yeah.
Yeah, and feeling that value and knowing what you can contribute in that.
Start as you would like to proceed, to
Absolutely.
continue. Yeah.
I think another little one that someone pointed out to me a few years ago, which is fascinating, is actually language. And apparently women use the word just a lot, whereas men
In
don't.
emails too, and sorry.
I just wanted to ask you something, I just wanted to apologise, I just wondered, and all of those, they're all kind of slightly diminutive, slightly recessive.
There's a Gmail add-on that can alert you to when you're using the word just and
there you
sorry
go.
that
So-
you can add in.
So remove
Yeah.
just. And the other interesting thing is, so I was saying this actually to a whole bunch of male colleagues the other day, and they said, well, that's really interesting. Here's another one. Apparently, people who are taken more seriously and listened to more in meetings use the word now. And, which is also really cool when you think about it, because basically you can use now when you want to say and when you're nervous and you're trying to figure out what
Or
to say next.
trying to stop other people talking.
That's right. You can just go now, and the pause afterwards holds immense gravitas, and everyone just wants to know what's going to happen next.
That's
So there's another
great.
good one. Don't say just, replace it with now.
Yeah.
Off you go.
Jim, as the token male in this panel,
Token male.
what would you suggest, as also a male, if you are witnessing this
So
happen?
what I would suggest, if you're in a situation where you're not being heard, you're being pushed down because of your gender, leave. Just fucking leave. Go and work for good people. Because you're only here for 80 odd years, and you don't want to waste them working for people that...
Dickheads.
And for idiots, yeah. And if I was in a situation, I'm non-gender, and I'm faced with senior management that continually push me down, I'm not going to go to a bookstore and think, which book do I read to help me solve this problem? Whereas when I'm facing this problem that is continually, day after day, pushing me down and not helping me move forward in my life, my career, etc., just leave.
I would also add, when I left, design was my second degree, and when I left, there was lots of lecturers and telling me what the good job was to get. And I was offered 2 of those jobs, So I should have been over the moon. And I said no to both because I went to interviews at both. I would have been the only woman there. One was a team of 40. It just smelt of links. That was enough to say no. But realising that you don't have to follow what the path should be, I was really nervous making that decision. I moved into a job that numerous people told me would end my career. Definitely didn't do that. And I really think that you should trust in what you want out of life. Sounds a bit woo-woo, but like figuring out what you want your day-to-day to look like. If you want to, like I did this super tackily with a Pinterest board, and it was like go for a swim in the morning, be able to have a leisurely cup of tea, take my dog for a walk, work a normal 8-hour day, not do overtime, be able to wear whatever I want and listen to music all day. That was my ideal day. I'm never going to work with Niccola because of that. So figuring out where you can do what you want to do every day, I'd say that's also the reason that a lot of women leave those positions. You can leave, you don't have to be around dickheads. I work for myself, I can work with the people that I love, and it's scary, but you can do that. That is something that I feel like a lot of graduates aren't told. They're pushed into particular kinds of positions and told that they should fit that culture. You don't have to fit that culture. You can move.
It's about finding that authenticity of yours, who you are, what you want,
Yeah.
and it is. It's different for every single human being.
Yeah.
I have a class on authenticity, and I start it with Fleetwood Mac's song "You Can Go Your Own Way,"
With
and
these
it's
sleeves.
one of those songs that stick, right? And so this is my psychological kind of
That's
imprint.
it's literally my password. Go your own way.
Oh, wow.
No one can.
You have to
Everyone can
change
get
it
into my
now.
laptop
I
now.
know, it's
But
scary.
it's true, that's one of those tricks. It's knowing authentically who you are and what you want, to have the courage to say no.
Yeah.
And I think it's not an easy thing to do when you have an opportunity for a job. I mean, we both grew up in the western suburbs in Melbourne with parents who are like, why are you studying design? Is not going to get a job. The first job you get, take it, But saying no, not easy. But
Yeah.
when you know authentically what it is you want, you can say no to those things that you don't.
But we're talking about Niccola, we're talking about a very subtle form of abuse.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're not talking about, just stick at it just so you can build a career. We're talking about a very subtle form of abuse that both men and women face.
Yeah. And the longer
Yeah.
you're in it, the less you realise
Absolutely.
how much it's affecting.
It's like you're in a pot of boiling water that gets
Yeah,
hotter and hotter
slowly.
slowly. If you're facing those things long enough, just walk away. Like,
I
don't-
think though, sorry, just to put in the, I'm going to put the corporate spin on this now. I think you can give it a good go. I think even if you are in an environment that has a certain culture, and I'm in an environment that has a certain culture, I normally stick to my 8-hour days.
Yeah.
I tell people exactly what I'm going and doing. Say, for example, on Tuesday mornings, I go horse riding. I'm late to work every Tuesday morning because I go horse riding, and I walk into the agency 20 to 30 minutes late. I go, good morning, everyone. I had the best horse ride this morning. And I think just calling it suddenly makes everyone else go, well, hang on, I could actually go for a run or a swim or take my dog out or see my child for a little while longer, or whatever it is, because the truth is at the end of the day we get the same amount of work done. And I think that it's getting increasingly difficult even for big corporate organisations to stomp on you at that moment because everyone's talking about work-life balance. And I think that they have to respect that and acknowledge that, and at least you're being honest about it. You're not sneaking around.
Yeah.
You're just going, this is me, this is my life, this is what I do.
And not apologising for it.
No.
Yeah. I think I don't get it so often because I obviously surround myself with women quite a lot now. But do you find mansplaining still a thing in your position, even though you are in that?
100%.
Yeah.
Yep. In fact, I had an amazing incident about a year ago now where I actually was doing a whole lot of research for an article I was writing and feeding it back into this mentoring program that I was setting up. And so I made an appointment with a very senior creative director to discuss their perspective on the topic. And then I was mansplained to for 40 minutes without pause. Like literally, he did not draw a breath, spouted all of these statistics that didn't exist. And his final closing remark before I was pushed out of the room by the EA was, "I've got a solution for you though. I think that we should start an agency creche." And
God.
and I kind of like, I was just left there with my jaw on the floor going, I should have stood up, clearly. I should have done
Power
something.
And said now.
But I had the mansplaining of my life, and I walked out of the room going, so we just had a conversation about gender and I didn't get a word in for 40 minutes. So yeah, it still exists.
Jane?
How do you, that's an interesting word, and I find it means different things to different people. How do you define mansplaining?
I didn't know how to define it until I read a wonderful essay by Rebecca Solnit called Men Explaining Things to Me. And she is this amazing woman who has 8 books to her name on just the most intense like science and history topics. And the example that I remember was she was at this party with academics, and this man was telling her all about this very important book on this very specific history subject that was about to come out, and you couldn't possibly understand it though, it's very complicated, do you want me to give you the like rundown? And she was like, no, I wrote that book, that is me, I am the important author. And he continued to explain what it was about for 20 more minutes. And she says in that essay, which is now a book, which I recommend you all read, is countless women are told that they are not reliable witnesses to their own lives, that their truth is not their property now or ever. And I think often that shows itself in you. If I say, oh, I didn't feel like I was taken seriously in that meeting, or, oh, I don't think that people really understood what I was saying, often a man says, oh no, that wasn't the case. And you're like, oh, okay, well, I don't trust my own feelings or my own understanding of what just happened to me. Or like in much more serious cases, often with sexual assault and things like that, people will explain what has happened to them, and generally men will say, no, that wasn't the case, it was just this or just that. So that's how I explain mansplaining.
My authentic self, I only have certain hours in a day for different things that I do.
Yeah.
As we all spread ourselves thin, and I simply don't have the time for it.
Yeah.
But I found, personal development, constructing an argument and having confidence in that argument was a huge thing for me.
Yeah.
It has been for a long time, and I started a PhD, and all that is all about is constructing an academic argument.
Yeah.
And can I tell you how much confidence that's given me
Yeah.
in learning to sort of combat that sort of conversation in everyday life. But when I am confident, and I know I can just keep pushing. But I think sometimes when someone is doing that, it is not just giving them the time and space to do it, because it's not important. I don't agree, and I will go on to the next thing I need to do.
Yeah.
Because sometimes even that well-structured argument just falls on deaf ears.
Yeah, sometimes it's just, obviously that's a vast generalisation, but
Yeah.
Jane, can you tell us how you can know where your bias lies?
Yeah, we were talking about that before, how somewhere you're working with wants to do some unbiased training. Google are one of the best places to do it, and you can go online and have a look. All their materials for how they conduct their unconscious bias training is there. And there's this test, can't remember what university it comes out of, that they use, that you can test yourself to see how much bias you have, and it's always surprising when you think you're an educated person with an open mind how biased you really are.
Oh, we all do it. Yeah.
It's freaky. But the key to it is just stopping and asking yourself in every situation, what do I think, what do I feel? It's just that self-questioning is the basic linchpin of all that sort of training.
Yeah.
And awareness. Once you know, you know, they put up a picture of a doctor and you've got to press a male or female button and they do it. That's the gist of it, over and over again. And so you're not thinking, you're just doing things, and it's incredible.
Yeah, implicit association test is what that is called.
It's funny actually, because I realised I used unconscious bias all the time, or was kind of influenced by it when I was coming up with creative ideas. And so about probably a year ago now, I decided, and I've been doing a lot of work for Woolworths, so I can actually reference a particular campaign that I was doing, and it was a price campaign, which is not the most exciting thing you can do for a supermarket. It was basically, we need to tell people that our products are cheap and promising start. And I went, well, I want to give it a human edge, and the truth is that the reason why you want to spend less money on groceries is, in a lot of cases, because you're a family, and you're just trying to have good family moments and make ends meet. So let's create a family. And then I went, well, but let's create a family that's your classic family, except for the fact that actually Dad happens to be the person who cooks the meals and does the shopping, that he's actually fulfilling the mum role. Like, so simple. And yet what was extraordinary about it is we went live with this campaign with this dad who's just, you know, kind of amused by the fact that he's consistently being eaten out of house and home by his family. The response that we had back to this, where we had dads from all over the country going, it's so cool to finally see a dad on TV who's cooking and looking after the kids, and he's there when the kids come home from school. And then from women going, you make me want to find a man like that. You know, I'm encouraging my husband to spend more time with the children, and I go, that is amazing, because I've got these crappy little 30-second and 15-second spots that you guys don't care about, and you probably change the channel when they come on. And yet I'm actually able to tackle unconscious bias just by making a simple creative decision. And I think that's amazing. And I think if everyone started to do that and use those little billboards in our lives, it would make a big difference.
And Jim, you're passionate about that too, like representation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a long way to solving part of this problem, because that's what a normal man does.
Yeah,
You know?
it's true.
I wash the dishes, change the nappies, I cook dinner, etc.
I don't know if it is.
No, I think part of the problem is generalising so much, having such a macro big data view. That is part of the problem,
and it's
and
hard
not actually.
Sorry, no.
Not actually looking at the microcosm of someone's home that is repeated throughout suburb after suburb and state after state. That they're actually. I don't surround myself with women. I know you said I surround myself with good women. Because in my experience, 44 years of being here, I've met a lot of stupid women. Yeah?
And stupid.
They broke my heart.
Surely. Yeah.
They broke my heart again. They met stupid men. They broke my heart again, etc., etc. So I surround myself with good women and good men.
Yeah.
So part of the problem, and I think mansplaining, the whole concept of it, is part of the problem, because it's a gross generalisation. Let me mansplain something to you. That's a joke, by the way. I feel it's a gross generalisation that puts all men in a bucket, and it actually makes a lot of men very self-conscious and recede. And that might be good payback over centuries of women receding.
Yeah.
But that doesn't solve the issue.
No, it doesn't.
What does solve the issue is the 15-second Woolworths ad that actually shows a man in the kitchen or a man taking his kids to school, because fucking hell, that's what I do.
Yeah.
And those men that responded to it probably said that, and women as well. Now, what I'd like to see is two men that are the heads of the family.
Yeah.
Same.
Or two women
Yes.
that have children from two different women.
Yeah.
Like my friends.
Yeah. And
those little things, sorry, I'll finish.
No.
Those tiny little things are what's going to move us forward. The big macro things, like, forgive me, mansplaining, the big data view of things, actually just make the problem bigger.
Well, it's because it's so multifaceted and massive that's the only way to often talk about it quickly. And I do agree with you though. And I think I'm sure that the reason why I am such a confident feminist woman is that my father was like you and was the cook and was there after school and was there to support me all the time. And my husband is the same. We share all responsibilities, 50-50. If I have a lot of work to do, he does everything. And that's how it should be. It's a fair balance. And I'm sure that that is why I am how I am. And you can see how that will inform your children.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's those good role models in media that need to be celebrated. They're not huge famous things that happen.
Yeah, it's small.
They're just those little, I'm glad you mentioned it, Niccola, those little 15-second ads that are just there.
Yeah.
And they just happen and they go away.
Yeah.
And there's lots of them. That's what's
And
critical.
it's the same as you making your warrior person a she in your book.
Yeah.
It's the same as when someone's illustrating a crowd scene, making them people of colour as well as whatever you look like when you automatically draw yourself. Everyone, whatever their job is, has an ability to stick that in. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can I add that, you know, that big data is the Australian male though. Women do, it was in the paper a couple of weeks ago, 75 to 80% of the household duties. Like on average, it is the mum doing the shopping and vacuuming the floor. That was the stat that was in the paper. But we were talking also before about how the UK Advertising Standards Authority has just banned the use of gender stereotypes to try and combat that whole nasty cycle of the big data feeding these stereotypes and then putting that out in our visual culture. And as designers, I mean, no standard authority is doing that in Australia. I doubt they ever would.
But our own standards do.
This is what I'm saying, as people who contribute to the visual culture, as designers, whether it's game design, whether it's advertising, whether it's book covers, whatever, we all have that opportunity to even not overtly do it, subvertly.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, you're just presenting a concept, it just happens to be there, not explaining it away, not saying the whys,
But that's all you have to do. That changes the environment that we live in. Like, it's the classic, be the change you want to see. I actually got criticised the other day, by the way. It was a proud moment for me. Someone said that I don't feature enough blonde people in my work. And apparently I'm actually discriminating against blondes at the moment professionally.
So am I in this panel, actually.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. We clearly have a brunette bias going on here, excepting yourself, of course. Beautiful thing. But yeah, I think, you know, and that's been a deliberate effort to go, well, actually, if you walk down the street in Australia, not everyone is blonde-haired and blue-eyed.
In fact, the minority are, especially naturally.
Exactly. That's the way I'm going to cast my ads. I'm going to cast my ads to represent the way I see society as I walk down the street.
And I think the key takeaway is that whatever you do, there's always something more that you can do. And if you have the ability to do it, you should. So one example is Make Nice is a not-for-profit situation. I don't make money from it. I don't pay myself from it. And I figured out another way that I can help, because the problem last year for Make Nice was that it was a majority white audience. And obviously they're all women, so that's great, but I needed to fix that. So a lot of people of colour can't afford the ticket price for Make Nice. So there's a donation option when you buy your own ticket that you can contribute $1, $5, $10 towards a ticket, and once that reaches a certain amount each, we kind of match it and give tickets to people that otherwise wouldn't be able to afford to come to Make Nice. That's super simple, doesn't affect me that much at all, and makes a big difference to someone who gets that ticket. So I think that it doesn't matter whether you're an intern or an illustrator or a senior creative or an educator or a business owner. There's always something that you can do. And you can ask people. You don't have to come up with the solution all the time. I talked to people about that to check that it was something that would work before I did it. You don't have to know all the answers yourself. Is that something you would agree with? Like, there's always...
Maybe talk about your netball campaign. Didn't a client come to you wanting you to do that?
Yeah, the problems we solve at work, we get clients coming to us and saying, Netball Australia came to us and said that, you know, the Somalian girl in Altona doesn't see herself playing netball at the elite level.
Yeah.
Neither does the young boy.
Yeah.
Neither does the young gay boy, the young gay girl, the disabled community, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah.
So that essentially was the brief to solve that problem.
which I think is a really interesting case study because it's the client that's come, it's not come from, this is the solution you need to
proactively
have.
approaching you.
Amazing.
Yeah, pretty much all of our projects are those sorts of problems. Not all of them, the large majority of them.
Yeah. And is that part of the B Corp?
No. It was more just, I guess, our brand attracts that type of client,
Yeah.
which is a sign of a really good brand positioning, I guess.
Yeah. Good job.
So it attracts the right client. B Corp, no. Yeah, I can't really say much about B Corp as yet. We've only been a B Corp for a year and a half.
Yep.
So, yeah.
But it has an inclusive kind of philosophy behind it as well.
It does, yeah. It just believes that business can be a force for good. It's a really good network at the moment. So in Australia, I think there are only 150 B Corps, so it's a pretty small network. So we'll see how we go.
Yeah. So to kind of finish up the conversation, why should anyone do any of these things? What are the benefits? If you're maybe not as altruistic, what are the selfish kind of reasons why diversity is good for your business or your career?
One of the big buzzwords is innovation in our industry too, and diversity has been shown to increase that. Like that's one big reason, you know. When it's the same, maybe elitist group or the same type of people trying to create new ideas, new business, it just does more of the same, and that innovation, it's not the right environment for it to happen, for it to create. But different people in a group coming up with ideas, there's often friction, and that's friction, and that sort of disparate thoughts is where innovation comes from. So I think one of the huge benefits for this, for diversity, for inclusivity, is to feed this big push from the government in the design sector for innovation. Like that's one huge benefit there.
It's just a numbers game, right? Like, surely if you're only considering half the population for something, if you consider the whole of the population, things are going to get better. And plus, surely you want to have an equal representation of society when you're representing society, if that makes sense. You know, like at the end of the day, you actually do want the opinions of absolutely every individual person to come into play when you're creating things that shape our society and our environment. And that's what we do as designers and as creatives.
Jim?
I think it starts at the micro level. I would say to my two girls that they should just assume that they'll be CEOs one day. I'll say the same thing to my son and tell him that his sisters will be CEOs as well.
Yeah.
I also think it begins at nurturing young and emerging talent in our industry. I arrived here 15 minutes before we began because I had a meeting with a young woman who reached out to me via my blog, and we just caught up for a coffee this morning. She's a young creative leader, and she's proactive. She showed all the traits of a good leader, not just a good female leader, just a good leader.
Yeah.
And we had a great chat this morning, and she networked, you know, and all of that.
Yeah.
So it's in those micro interactions where we will lift people up, both men and women, and help them just become good people, not just good men and good women, but just good people.
Yeah. I will honestly also say, just email people like Jim. If you have heroes, email them, because 90% of the time they'll respond. Unless you kind of go a bit crazy in your email, you know, they'll.
It's a fine line between stalking and
but so many of my now peers I emailed when I had just graduated, and because I knew what I wanted from them, because I wasn't asking too much of them, and I had a plan as to how I would talk to them, it made a massive difference to the trajectory of my career.
Yeah, you'd actually be surprised at how few people do that. I mean, you may have experienced something different to me, but in my 2 years as head of awards school, here in New South Wales, we've had 100 graduates every year, and it's a national position as well, and so there's about 300 people across the country. And after awards school, I have only ever been contacted by maybe 5 people. And then in terms of follow-ups, people, because I always say that at the graduation, because I can't talk to people during the course because I have to remain impartial. I say after the course, here's your opportunity.
Yeah.
We'll do coffee. Like, you need to come to me, but I will happily give you 40 minutes of my time and we will have a coffee. And only 2 people have ever had a second cup of coffee with me.
Yeah.
And so I find that interesting. I kind of go, so you claim you really want this, but I'm offering you the opportunity for mentoring and relationships and ongoing conversation, and you're not following up.
Yeah.
So follow up, do it.
Well, Brodie Lancaster, who spoke at Make Nice last year, she said in an interview I did with her, get yourself to 60% and I'll help you get to 80%. You can't come to me at 0 and expect me to push you to 100. You know, do your work, show me that you care, then I'm happy to help you get to that next level, and come knowing what you would like me to help you with. And the same thing goes even in my position, emailing people for Make Nice that are like hero speakers that I still think will never respond to me. I've not had one speaker not agree or say yes emphatically within 24 hours, whether they're international or national speakers. And so I call bullshit on people that say that it's too hard to find female speakers for that. Like, I have 100% success rate with asking people. So I think it's, the onus is also on you to do the asking as well, because it does pay off. Yeah.
That's when I'm pushing my students out onto that first step of internship. You were saying value that macro level. If you are in a business, valuing interns, paying them, it's illegal not to. But that follow through, crucial thing. And every time I've had a student who's contemplated that authenticity and found studios that they'd like to work with, every time they put it out there, it's always listened to.
Yeah.
It might not always be a job, but it's
Yeah.
true. You've got to ask and follow through.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, guys.